Apple, right? And I saw some people commenting like it's part of Apple's broader plan, right? To eventually get everybody to transition away from these handheld devices into the Apple glasses, right? It just start the eyes slowly start to adjust to seeing things like that, so it's an easier transition. And I'm like, sometimes you wonder, do you really give these people this much credit, or is it just it was something cool they came up with and thought it was different from what everybody else is doing in the market, might be easy on the eyes, and then they slowly develop into things, or do they actually have this methodical 20-year plan to move people from physical devices to other types of like augmented, reality stuff, you know what I mean?
I It's weird because when I think of Apple, like even today, let's be honest, they're the company that technology wise, they're very much behind. Like all all of the other companies within the Android world have kind of picked up steam and it's kind of pretty much doing what Apple hasn't been doing. And then Apple kind of just comes along every couple of years, says, "Hey, we created this new idea." It's like, "Hey, Android's been doing this for years. Like, where have you been?" You know? But at the same time, like you're right, like Apple has this tendency of doing things. And I think we've talked about this before. I think that influence has to do where like Apple's in this like weird world. It's like where they're woke and extremely progressively liberal, but at the same time they're like kind of supporting the middle, like the underdog, like the underground, the indie scene. But at the same time, like they're trying to like promote themselves as something that they're not. But
Mm.
I do hear you what you're saying with that liquid glass idea. It's like you're not wrong, you're not far off
Yeah.
either.
Yeah. Well, Apple, I think, yeah, you're right. They're in this weird space because obviously they started like that and they evolved into this whatever they are right
I don't
now.
even know.
Obviously, they're
Who
like
knows?
maybe they don't even know, right? Uh,
I don't think
I mean,
so.
it's possible they may not even know, but they evolved. But in like times past, like with these older companies, like I don't know, like Sears comes to mind, right? And these old, they had like this life cycle where they would peak and they would get so big, and then they were so big that it almost started working against them, and they started to slow downward spiral into nothingness. But I think Apple is maybe aware of where they are in the life cycle and they're trying to balance it out. And maybe that's where the identity part is a little, who are we really? What are we trying to be? I mean, who knows? We're just talking here, right? Maybe they have a clear cut understanding of who they are and where they fit into the realm of things in the world today, right?
I mean, but the funny part about it is that like it's kind of always been a company where they focused very heavily on innovation and design. You know, like I think we both can remember a time where Apple was kind of that brand where it was hard enough to get music off the internet. It was kind of nice to have this device that just was kind of simple. It had a click wheel. It did what you wanted. You plugged in your headphones, you got your music. If you're going on the train, you're going on your bike, or just going around. That kind of stuck with a lot of people because that's kind of what Apple was. It's like you want technology, but you want something nice. You want something that's simple, gives you kind of a direction. The issue is you're right. As something grows, keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, it kind of loses identity. I mean, this is not the only company that suffered from this. I mean, think about like video rentals, electronic stores. Like we had Circuit City, Best Buy was massive. There was Tower Records, um, Blockbuster, Hollywood Videos. I mean, there was a ton of other places, but like they got to a point where they got so big, they weren't realizing what was blinding them that they just withered away into nothing.
Yeah, it's funny you say things like Blockbuster because essentially, if you want to look at parallel tracks, you could look at Blockbuster, you could look at Netflix, because maybe to some people who are listening to us talking right now, they may not be aware that Netflix was around way before the days of streaming, I mean, particularly I used to order or rent stuff from Netflix,
Hmm.
but you'd get these cool indie films from different part of the world and you'd mail it in, they mail it back to you and then you mail it back to them and all, but Blockbuster was there with all their physical locations, and I mean, obviously, for since their inception, uh, I mean, you had the small mom and pop type rental stores, and then Blockbuster turned it into this spectacle of a thing. It was a thing. It's a Blockbuster night, right? And it was interesting to see that evolution because obviously people at Netflix had a vision and they made a transition. They said the future is this. They lost money for, I think, 12, 15 years when they transitioned to online streaming. So obviously they had a vision, a plan. They had to be prepared, knowing they were going to lose money for a decade and a half before they actually turned a profit over. In the meantime, Blockbuster went under in spectacular fashion, right? It's almost a thing that movies are made of to a degree. And Netflix did this slow evolution, redefined itself, reinvented itself, it became like this new evolving, to the point now where they're so big, I think they're almost right back at that cycle again, where, okay, who are we right now again, right?
And
And where are we going? What are we doing? Uh,
there, the idea that we forget is our involvement with entertainment, particularly films, movie, comedy shows, or just Broadway production, just anything that's on a stage, very much came from interactions. There was, again, like we were talking about, there was a time where you'd get music, you had to go somewhere physically. Sometimes actually like start opening up a conversation with the guy that's selling you the music, or the person that's trying to sell, like give you a video rental for you and your family to watch. You know, I think that's what's happening with even with movie theaters. People have been asking, or the question's been going on, where movie theaters are kind of failing at this point, and it's because it used to be a place where everybody could afford to go to the movies. Let me say that a little louder. Everyone could afford to go to the movies.
it's so funny you said that. I was talking to my wife the other day. I'm obviously, as a filmmaker, I'm an avid movie fan. I still like the cinematic
Yeah, it's
experience. I
nice.
prefer to go to theaters. I prefer to watch stuff in the theaters versus at home. More specifically, I prefer to go to theaters where they have equipment and technology that I do not have at home, right?
Yeah.
So it's a different kind of experience. But having said that, I think we went to go watch something the other day or a couple of months ago, and our theaters here, and I'm not going to call them out because I understand the times have changed, costs have risen. I was shocked though to see that in 1 year the price, because typically here you can go watch a film for nine bucks, right? And I noticed the price doubled in probably less than a year. All of a sudden, it's 20 bucks just to see a regular film, whereas and then you look at the popcorn and all the stuff, and it's like, whoa, that like almost like went 2.5 times the price from last year, right? And it's like, wow, okay, so no wonder you have a lot of families I could see. You get two people, three kids, and it's like, yeah, let's make it a Netflix night, right? It's only costing us so much for five people. We can make our snacks at home, and versus you might be going to the theater with just a family of five, and you're dropping $500-600 maybe, right? Just in all the stuff. So I get it. But we're in 2025, right? Hyperinflation, all of these things, the cost of doing everything has gone up, materials, this, that, whatever. They're trying to keep pace, and the rest of the world is trying to keep pace. I understand why there's so many people on strike. I get it. But still, it's pretty alarming, right? Because you could see it right there in front of your eyes, like, wow, what is going on, right?
Well, I think it also stems to people are, and even for myself, like you're craving experiences, and I think something we've touched on before was one of the real ways of getting that with films these days, and one of the only ways of doing it. Yeah, it's cheaper than going to the movie theater. Obviously, there's costs that come with it. Is film festivals, or just being able to go to an out, a venue where they have people that are coming in, maybe putting on independent films, maybe it's an independent production of some kind, but at least it gives some type of value. A person doesn't feel like they're walking in watching, I don't know, the next Marvel movie. Who knows? And then spending like $80 just on the popcorn and all the shit just to be there for 3 hours. Instead, you're in an environment with tons of other people, maybe artists or content creators, and then you're in this experience. Then you got the director and the producer that's coming out and introducing the film. You're like, holy shit, and everybody's applauding, and you're all over the place. People want experiences.
And you said something, and you hit the nail on the head. There's something about the shared experience,
Yeah.
and I haven't seen this Minecraft film that, but when it was actually announced, everybody thought it was going to lose money hand over fist. And it was funny because obviously the film came out, and I'm seeing clips of like mayhem going on in these theaters, right? And I'm sitting there like, wow, these all of these people here are obviously having a shared experience. I know there's some people that were quite annoyed about it, and other. I just, again, there's a time and place for everything, and I
Obviously.
appreciate how the UK theater said, hey, we're gonna have special screenings late at night. For these types of crowds
Mm.
and normal families, you can come at this time of the day. I appreciate that they got ahead of it and they did that. But I actually thought it was great to see people having such a great experience in there, and they're just laughing and having a good time, and you'll never replicate that by yourself at home, right? So as you said, it's that it was a unique experience, and I'm like, shoot, I wish I don't know if I was in the UK or something, I would have went to those midnight screenings of Minecraft, just to see that energy because they look so excited in there, but yeah, it's a unique experience they won't get at home. That's why they're going there, right?
Right. And it's also where, we forget one of the benefits and one of the drawbacks of being able to have the internet and have this ability of connecting literally across the globe. you know People want more now than ever to have those physical interactions, have that shared experience. you know we're talking about Minecraft, but there were attempts of trying this many years before. A great example of it was Rocky Horror Picture Show that came out in the 70s. Like, I think if that movie came out in the time of the internet, it probably would have been a different story. It probably would have had something like what happened with the Minecraft movie, because these movies entice that shared experience. It's like you come to see this so you can watch it with your friends, or your colleagues or whatever. And that that is a special talent right there, because that really taps into where people's minds are for the times.
Yeah. One of the most memorable films I can speak to. There's probably three of them, and I can go through, but I'll call one out because it's more
Sure.
recent in the past. I don't know if you remember the film The Disaster Artist. It had James Franco as the lead. It was based on a true story about these guys who did this indie film called The Room and the ridiculousness of
Oh,
the making of the film.
yeah, I know what you're talking about.
And yeah, so they did the film The Disaster Artist, and obviously I went to see the film. Now, the film has a cult following. It's had a cult following for I don't know how many years now. It screens at midnight screenings all over the world at film festivals still, like maybe 30 years plus after it was actually made. So I knew the film had a following, and I knew a lot about the background of the making of the original. So the Disaster Artist I thought would be a fun film to go watch, and I went to the theater, and when I wanted to go see it, I was shocked because the theater was sold out, and I'm talking about a 600 seat theater, and I had to literally like sit in the front row, the where your neck is like looking up at the screen, and it's
Huh?
so uncomfortable. You barely really see the film, but what I remember most about that film is I would look back to a packed theater. Almost every seat was occupied. and people were just laughing at the scenes because they knew the story so well, that when things would come up, whatever, them tossing a football, all of a sudden I saw a football getting tossed in the theater, right? And it's like they just knew the film so well, they were reacting to like everything in there. Uh, Not like Minecraft movie, but in
Close
more of a
enough.
fun way,
Yeah.
more of a fun way where I'm seeing people just laughing and this, they're like falling over, and I'm like, if I watched this film at home, it would have been a completely different kind of experience than whatever I'm seeing right now, right? But that's, you don't get that every time. You know what I mean? In contrary to that, I'll say one of my favorite films, Interstellar.
Oh yeah.
I went to go see it probably 21 times in the theater. And largely one of the reasons why I went, okay, filmmaker here. So the first few times I wanted to see the film, gripping, I wanted to understand it. Every other time after that, I really went to go watch I wanted to watch the audience watching the film. And I was watching the audience on certain scenes to see how they reacting. There were some scenes where I'm like, everybody's on the edge of their seat right now in like anticipation of what's going on. And it speaks to Christopher Nolan and what he's doing in his work there. But literally, I'm an observer of the audience watching the film. And I'm just watching how although everybody's in their own like mindset, like gripped and focused
Yeah.
on the story,
Yeah.
but yet it was almost like you could see all these people, and it was like they're having a story in and of themselves, right? That they're having a shared experience without knowing they were having a shared experience together, right?
But
And
it it also I one thing that I really loved about that movie, it really taps into the idea of what it is to be really alone. Because spoiler alert, throughout the movie there are distinctive scenes, like for example when they go down to the planet, right? You know, the water planet, and
Miller's Planet,
yeah,
yes, yeah,
they don't realize that time is moving a lot faster than they think it is. And by the time they go back onto the ship, I think it was like 18 or 20 years had passed since they landed or something crazy
yes,
like that. And
yeah.
that just plays with your mind. You're just like, but the scene was only like 5 minutes.
Mm. It was a and first of all, the scene, I think in on Miller's Planet, time moved slower on the planet, but obviously
Oh, right.
outside the planet,
It
it
was
was moving a
faster.
lot faster. And so the scene itself, that was one of the favorite scenes I had, just to watch people watching the scene, right? Because there was so much anticipation building up with that scene, and it was so dramatic for everybody. That was one of the scenes where I found everybody was literally on the edge of their seats. Sometimes we use that nail biting expression. I literally saw people almost nail biting, right? And then yeah, and then you get the shocker when he goes back to and so much time has passed and his daughter is like grown up
Yeah.
sending these videos, and it's like, you're right, it messes with your mind in a way because it also speaks to our perception of time,
It's not real.
right?
Time is not real.
It's
It's not real.
yeah.
You know, I was listening to Neil deGrasse Tyson that was talking about this, and like one of the interviewers were arguing with him, and he said, "You don't understand." He said, "I'm not saying that time isn't real. I'm trying to explain to you that time is a measurement that we use. That's what it is. Time is not a it's not a value. It's a measurement. It's a way of measuring the way that, for example, in our planet, how it rotates, the 24-hour rotation, that cycle that we go around our sun, how we move around the galaxy. Like that's how. But the second you get out of that world, the second you get out of that reality, all of that goes straight out the window. And that's what Interstellar like opens up. Even to the very end, you see that for its truth, because he's the last of the Mohicans.
Can you imagine if we stopped measuring time? Do you think we would age? We would probably stop aging ourselves to a degree.
Oh, that would be
Every year
wonderful.
we keep saying we're so much years older now. We're kind of getting to the point where we're gonna have gray hair. And you imagine if we just stopped, m- maybe we would just stay exactly as we are. That could be a whole sci-fi movie in and of itself, right? But although I think there was one with Justin Timberlake, but
There was one around that idea. It came out in the 70s. I think it was called Logan's Run, where people I think lived they had to like live until like 35 or something crazy like that. Like this idea of where like we don't follow the guidance of time. It's just there's the cycle, and then once you finish the cycle, that's it. We move on, and that's it. I'd like
hmm.
that is kind of the crazy tipping point of sci-fi because the second you start getting into those realms like wormholes, time portals, time travel, time changes, like there's a lot.
I was saying to somebody the other day, I don't remember who, I said, I feel like my worldview of life was shaped by what I was watching when I was around 8 to 10 years old, which is Star Trek. Largely Star Trek Next Generation. So I have gone back as an adult, and I wanted to go watch all of the series that I used to watch when I was younger, Next Generation. I did get through that like a decade ago, and I've recently started Voyager again, just because I want to know what I was actually watching when I was a kid.
Because it's hard to
Because when
remember.
I,
It's hard to remember all of
yeah,
the things that are going on in there.
it's well, and I remember watching those things like, oh, cool sci-fi effects, makeup, costumes, alien space, space stations, spaceships, all of that type of stuff. But when you go back as an adult and you start looking at, okay, what was really influencing me as like a kid, right? And as I go back and look, I'm realizing, I think a lot of my worldview was shaped by what I was watching. But they, just storytelling wise, I mean, I feel like we're living in if we went back in time, maybe even to the original series, whenever that came out, the 60s, 70s, we might as well be living in that era now because I'm looking at stuff. I see all the artificial general intelligence they use, the tablets, the mobile devices, everything. It's like, oh, okay, so we're here essentially, right? The only thing I think we haven't done is explored space, to my knowledge. Maybe we have already. You never know. You never know these
Mhm.
days. We might already be way out there, and by the time we know about it, it's like, oh yeah, by the way, we established a colony in this galaxy. And it's like, well, when did we like leave Earth to go to some remote galaxy? And you're like,
Mm,
oh well, we did that in the 1950s. And it's like, what?
yeah, like when did that? But I think that's something that gets lost in translation. Especially even when you're dealing with Star Trek, because a series like Star Trek, right, which was created by Gene Roddenberry, the reason that series got its roots was because of somebody like Lucille Ball. Nobody wanted to put up that show at all. And here you have this person that gave us Lucy, that comes along and like, here's this man's idea, which Gene Roddenberry had a lot of science behind what he was creating. It wasn't just some sci fi show. He really wanted to keep some realistic elements into it. And even 60 years into the future, you could still see that. Like you said, like as an adult being able to watch this, you see how even if it's very much of its period, there's a lot of things that goes beyond imagination, goes beyond fiction. It delves into what ifs and possibilities using our physics and understanding of geometry and science. Do we have warp technology? I don't think so. But it's cool. It's really cool, especially the engine room and you see those balls of light. And you're like, holy shit, is somebody going to die? Nah.
Listen, if I had to bet whether or not we had the technology, I think I'm going to put a bet that we have it somewhere in the world, and they just we weren't told about it.
Shit.
And the only reason why I say that is because I'm just looking. It's like we're having this huge conversation about AI, artificial general intelligence, artificial superintelligence, and it's like, well, apparently the tech was out there 70s, 60s, right? It was way back in time. So I don't know how. advanced we are really in terms of a lot of that technology. I believe we're probably more advanced than we're talking here than we even know, right? I know these things start with the military and then they progress and then eventually they come to um, the general population. But by the time we're adopting it, it's like, well, how far did they already take this, right? You know what I mean? It's just like we started out talking about the Apple liquid glass. As you said, oh, well, okay, how far has this already gone? And
We're just touching the
you know,
iceberg.
just touching the iceberg, right? So to speak. But
It's it gets a little freaky when you start delving into, especially with like, because obviously we've been talking about films and making music and production and things. Okay, it's hard to understand this, but we went from a period where you needed a giant recording room, you needed tens of thousands of dollars for, filmmaking, music production, all of this. 15 years ago, maybe 16 tops. And then all of a sudden it's 2025. And then we could pretty much do all of this with our computers, with our phones. And like, if I could think of anything that's more alien, more strange and bizarre, and you're like, I've heard all of the explanations. Well, the advancement of technology, I call shit. Okay? We went from this to over 100 years ago where none of this existed. And then 15 years ago, none of this existed. Like, something stinks. Something really stinks over here.
yeah, the acceleration, it was way too fast.
Way
And
too
we don't
fast.
even have to talk about 100 years
Not
ago. You
even.
can just go back to the 90s. There was a definitive point in the 90s, and I'd say it was right at that moment, which would have placed us maybe mid 90s, where all of a sudden, they were pushing the internet out to the general public, the dot com boom, and then I think it's not that it wasn't there before. Well, obviously, we know the internet was around way
70s.
before they deployed it, yeah, before it was deployed to the general public. But there was a point there where it feels like there was this mass acceleration. It was like almost methodical. Okay, we have to start here, move to there, move to there, move to there, move to there, and then boom, end up eventually wherever it is that we're going, which is going to be at the quantum computing levels with artificial superintelligence and all kinds of things happening, right? And
It's nuts. I think
yeah, it's
I think also, to your point, right, because you bring up something that's really true. It's We see it from one lens, right? But if you look at it even from like somebody like Brian Eno, which he was using computers to make music in the early 70s. He was one of the pioneers for digital music. So it's right, it blew up very quickly in a very short period of time. However, there were people 40, 50 years prior that were already getting those gears turning to get where we are today. We just don't see that
but
whole compact history.
no, and if you want to look at something even crazier, when I watch some of these documentaries on like Atlantis and some of these lost worlds and things they've dug up from the ground and found in remote places, and they're like, well, there's evidence that other civilizations have had computing uh, technology. So it's not actually like anything brand new. Might be for us, you and me today in 2025, but maybe for if you want to look at the human history, and obviously we don't even know what that story is, but if somebody from a different perspective and a different dimension is looking down on a story of humanity start to finish, you might probably have seen these rise and falls of I think we're completely integrated in technology in the history and story of humanity. We just probably don't know how exactly, right? Because we just don't know our whole story, which that's
No.
a whole nother thing, right?
Well, the other thing I was talking with somebody about this, where we have this limited scope of where all technologies must stem from electricity, which a lot of our technology today stems from electricity and petroleum. However, these things happen by accident. We discovered electricity by accident. We discovered the ability to create petroleum and use fuel to be able to make plastics by accident. All this was by accident. Thousands of years before, people could have, civilizations could have run into different types of technologies that didn't use any of these things. We know that there's electromagnetism. We know that there is water propulsion. We know that there's different ways of making technologies that don't use any of these things. But we're so limited in our thinking that it's like, well, it's not possible that there's a computer that was made 3,000 years ago. Yes, it is. It doesn't mean it does use electricity.
Well, exactly, and you're right. The limitation in our mindset, I think, is where the problem is.
Yeah.
Uh, and I'll give you an example because sometimes I'll look at the world map and I literally will look at it. And Neil deGrasse Tyson said something that's very interesting. My wife and I talk about this all the time. He said the biggest issue in the world today is critical thinking. People aren't they don't know how to think anymore. And so I'm always looking at things from a very critical thinking standpoint. So when I look at maps, for example, and the world is outlined, and depending upon where it's printed, people like to create perceptions, to make their country look bigger than the other one or whatever it is. That's all, whatever. That's fine.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not calling out any names, but
Russia.
apparently that's the
Sorry, I have something in my throat.
that yeah,
Yeah.
that's like a thing. Okay, fine. But then it's like, is this really the world? Like, I don't have the capability to walk to every continent and walk over the ocean and see if this is actually there, or is there something else over here that's just excluded from this thing? Um, is there more than what meets the eye? Maybe that's just my inquiring mind that just wants to ask those questions and know. And it's like, but how would I know? I'm not, obviously maybe Elon knows because he has satellites in space, right?
Oh yeah. That man
He
has
may
got
have
his
a,
he's got his South African fingers all over the place.
yeah, he's probably got satellites in other galaxies already. Just forgot to tell people, right?
Yeah.
And well, there you go. If we have another colony in another galaxy, it's probably Elon, and they'll have a Tesla car out there. And he did actually launch one into space a few years ago, so maybe he was sending it somewhere on purpose, right?
I mean, way better publicity stunt than Katy Perry going up to space. I'm just saying. Just saying.
Yeah, that the Tesla makes way more sense, right?
Way more sense.
But
At least it went to space. You know? Let's clarify that too.
listen, if you were offered the ride, would you take it?
Honestly, no. I don't.
What do you think? It's too early?
I think that as much as I love sci-fi and much as I love space travel and just as I said, a final frontier, I don't think I'm a part of the generation that gets to experience that. I think that my generation is the ones that get to see these things early wise being built, and then possibly the next generations maybe having that opportunity to venture out. Like the first, we might be able to be alive to see the first space bay being built out in space, where they start actually building spacecraft in space. It's like, Jesus fucking Christ! It's 2025. We're still building them on this planet. Like,
Yeah. A la Star Trek, right? They used to build them in
what?
space.
How else are you supposed to
Literally.
build something that's traveling in space? You're building it on Earth with all the rules and
Yeah.
regulations of gravity and physics. Like, get
Uh,
the hell
yeah.
out of here!
You can only do it up there, but
Yeah.
I feel like there's so much to discover on Earth that we have yet to discover. The Earth is so big, and I've only seen maybe not even a fraction. I don't even know what it's called. And that's the stuff that I'm aware of, yet alone the stuff we're not even aware of. And I'm sure there are things on this planet and places on this planet we are not aware of it. You're not going to find them on a map, purpose, intentionally, I don't know. I just feel like there's so much to explore. It would almost be a shame, for example, let's say if we left Earth now to go discover another planet and we haven't even discovered our own planet yet.
No,
There's a weird paradox in that, you
even
know?
even our own oceans. I remember I saw a marine biologist where she explained that if you take a glass, just take one scoop of water from the ocean in a glass. She says that is how much of the ocean we've actually discovered. And the cool thing is, like, you have filmmakers. I don't remember the name of this film. This came out a few years ago, where it depicts this mining station that's at the bottom of the ocean, and
Hmm.
there's this series of incidents, and, like, basically, to make a long story short, it turns out they built this station on the grounds where this basically giant creature was sleeping for thousands of years. And then finally it awakes. And then this giant $1 trillion like thing that's on the bottom of the ocean gets completely shattered and thousands of people die because we didn't even know that there's things that live down there like that. Obviously this is fiction, but like just that idea just shows how little we know. Like you said, even our own planet, to the point, or even our own ocean.
I think that was Godzilla versus some other creature,
No,
right?
no,
That
no.
was
It wasn't a Godzilla
they
movie. It was
okay.
I'm gonna find it.
But
I'm gonna find
yeah,
it.
but you're right. Cause listen, I don't know how you look at the ocean. I mean, I can look at the ocean and see beauty, but at the same time, it's scary because you're like, what is in there, right? Obviously, we know some things, but what's really in that body of water, right? That's like a whole nother dimension in and of itself. You know what I mean? So it's like we don't even know. And we're living on the planet, so sometimes for me, as going back to what we're saying, it's weird because it's like we don't even know, to my knowledge, we don't know we haven't discovered Earth yet. And I understand maybe doing a hedging ourselves against some catastrophe, or hedging humanity against some catastrophe in the future where you could have a breakout colony or civilization somewhere on another planet. I get it. Okay, yeah, makes fine. Okay, preserve humanity, preserve the race, but still, it's just going back to what we're saying. I don't think I could leave Earth knowing I have yet to actually discover Earth in pursuit of some other planet. It's kind of like, is the grass greener on the other side? But it's probably greener where you're watering it more than anything.
Yeah,
So that's where, it's a tough one, right?
it is. I found the movie, by the way. It's called Underwater.
Uh, okay, that speaks to itself. Yep. Okay. Yes, I remember that.
It was
I actually started watching it. I remember seeing it. Yeah, yeah. But you know what? Hey, what are the chances of that? I think the chances are pretty high. We don't know. Well, as far as I know, you and I right now don't know what's under there, but maybe somebody does.
well.
Uh,
Keep in mind how far and how deep the ocean goes. Where to the point where you could almost put two Mount Everest on top of each other, and you still haven't reached the bottom of the ocean. And then on top of that is you have these creatures, these fish or whatever they are, that are able to live at these depths of immense amount of pressure. Immense amount of pressure. And they survive flawlessly. You know, that just goes to a testament of, like you were saying, if we want to be able to discover other forms of life, venture out into space. If we have on our own planet, right, creatures and beings that are able to withstand insane conditions, frigid temperatures, insane amounts of pressure, insane amount of climate change and environmental changes. What does that tell us? That tells us something about not only our planet, but what other planets could be like if conditions were
hmm.
different. That's what, to your point, that's what I'm trying to say is, like, if we focus more on this planet, there's so much more we can learn about other planets like ours from this place.
You want to hear something crazy?
Oh, yes.
Somewhere, or you might know this, or maybe whoever's listening may not know this, but somewhere uh, off of the border of Brazil, you have these tribes. Uh, they have been unexposed, to the world, and
Until
they,
recently. Yeah.
uh, yeah, and I know some people have escaped and been pulled out, or whatever the case may be, but we send drones in there to watch them, observe. They've studied their language, everything, right? And but they don't have any knowledge of the metropolitan world that we're living in. They're over there in like the jungles, in a very tiny space on this planet, and we're in these huge metropolitan cities, technology, cars, airplanes, transit, this, that, the electronics, everything's moving so fast. They're so removed from that if you probably, I always thought if you plucked one of them out, first of all, and you brought them to a metropolitan city, to them this would be alien. Like they'd probably think they're on another planet themselves or whatever. We know everything about them. They don't know anything about us. And I always wonder, is the opposite also true? Are there things we're not seeing, and are there people looking at us like that? Right? Just it's a different perception, right? Just like time, the perception is like everything, right? How we're perceiving it. So that's why I said there. And to speak to your point, yeah. What can we discover here that could translate to wherever it is Elon wants to take humanity, right? You know what I mean?
No, it also to your point, by the way, they're recent. I think this is pretty recent where they started even giving some of these indigenous tribes like Starlink and giving them the internet. And what's basically happened is like, what do you think happens? You give these tribes that have no connection to, like you said, the metropolitan area, you give them the internet. They're going to start watching porn. They're going to start, procrastinating. They're going to go out of there like, they're not going to know how to function and like be able to like live a normal life that they were before because you're exposing them to something they've never had ever before in their entire lives. You know, so that is also the caveat to this, right? Where it's not only being able to explore and understand our own planet, but also to understand the consequences to our own actions. It's like, yeah, it's great to have all of these things, but look what these things can do also.
Yeah, if not responsible, and I would think that to certain things there might be an agenda. Starlink being introduced to some of these indigenous tribes, you got to ask some questions about that. Number one, just because, do you disturb their natural
I
process
don't think
and
so.
pull them out, or do you just leave them alone, right? And just study, understand, evolve, various things like that. But you can't go back. Like once you do something like that, there's no going back. There is no, that's when you'll have like the youth essentially asking questions. They'll probably start thinking critically and saying, wait a minute, is there a world outside of this space? Should we pack up and start hiking and go discover, right? So you can never go back from something like that, right? And I don't know, maybe that was intentional,
Now,
right?
you know what? And the the marker in our history that we can see from that is, especially here in this country, especially in the United States, and you have this also in Canada, is with Native American and Indigenous tribes. Because of how much they've had to go through, they've had to adapt. There have been a lot of large tribes in Canada and the United States where they rely on the internet. They rely on websites to be able to document their language, their culture, their history. They have international events where they bring tribe members from different states or from Canada that come to, because like they're so scattered and broken up into small little territories and areas where this is how they can survive, because once you give this to a tribe or a people that had no connection to the outside world, they either get destroyed and assimilated, or die of disease, or survive and have to adapt. They got to live in regular houses like everybody else, even though they're not like everybody else.
Mm.
I mean, they've been here for
Yeah.
thousands of years, and they have to like justify why they're here. It's a little interesting.
Hey, can you imagine some of these tribes that you were mentioning? They get Starlink and they find YouTube, and they're going through YouTube and they find a documentary about their tribe, and all of a sudden they're watching themselves on the screen. Imagine how trippy that would be for the mind, just to try to get their, almost like the Truman Show in real life for them, right? But it's listen, and obviously we're just having a conversation. I'm
Yeah.
not saying that anything against those tribes. I'm sure something similar might be happening to us too. There might be a more advanced group of humans on the same planet living at the same time as we are, that are somehow removed from whatever we're doing, that are probably looking at us saying the same thing. I, hey, listen, this is the stuff sci-fi is made of, right?
No, and I again, like we were talking before, we really have not discovered a large portion of our oceans. And if you can think of some type of highly advanced species or something, I think if they would be living anywhere, they would be living in the oceans. Why on earth would you want to live on land? Meteors, asteroids. Better live in the water. The planet gets destroyed, you're fine.
Good
Look
point.
at sci-fi. Like every
Good
single
point.
film,
Yeah.
like be in the ocean. Screw the land.
And the ocean always survives. It always processes like waste and stuff like that. And it's funny. I used to think that the oceans all blended together, but apparently they don't,
No,
right?
nope.
They have their lines and borders, and they don't. It doesn't
Nope.
intersect. Isn't that something? That the water itself obviously is probably a being or a life form. But you're right. Just like the Earth is, it's a living thing. But yeah, under the water, again, I love to sit on a beach and just watch the ocean roar and the waves and the blue and the sunlight bouncing off the water, and it's beautiful, it's
Surreal.
zen, it's so many, many, many
It's like what you
things.
picture at Pilates. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but then, you start thinking about it. These are deep waters. I don't know what's under that water. Like it could be. It's the total duality, because you're sitting there and it's so zen on the top, but then beneath it is a very well, for me it'd be scary, because I have no idea what's there other than what we already know, which, as you said, is a fraction of whatever it is, right?
And like we were talking about, even with the division of the oceans, we know that there are species that, even though that they're from the same gene pool, if they're from the Atlantic Ocean and then from the Pacific, they're two completely different species. Like they're the same gene pool. So they're made up of the same genes, different patterns, different scales, different fins, different bone structure. You have creatures in there that are millions, sometimes like even sharks that are 60 million years old. You have lizards, like alligators and crocodiles, which were around in the times of the dinosaurs, that live
Yeah.
partially in water and live on land. Like, think about that for a second. Some of the oldest species on the planet live in our ocean floors.
Tells you everything you need to know right there, right? I mean, we know about the crocodile. Obviously, we know about that, but what else?
There's a lot.
We don't know. Like, yeah, as you said, whatever's going on under the oceans would have survived any of
They
the stuff
they found
that happened on the
they
surface.
found a 60 million-year-old fish last year that they thought went extinct. 60 million-year-old fish, and the species stayed exactly the same that it was 60 million years ago. Now, crazy.
So So apparently, what we have been able to figure out as humans is that there's probably about 13 billion different types of living species on the planet, and every day we keep discovering new stuff.
Yeah.
I can't even measure that number or even comprehend that. You know what I mean? So to sit there and put these boxes around our thinking is almost ridiculous because there it the comprehensiveness of it all is so massive that you just have to sit there and just almost be in wonder, like, wow, there's so many possibilities that we just even if you thought and were to experience a few of them in this lifetime, maybe something does come out of the ocean one day and introduces itself, right? That's only one scenario out of like so many things that could happen over the course of like the human story from start to finish, whenever the start was and whenever the finish would be, right? It's just a sliver, just a small little,
Little slice.
yeah,
Little $7 slice from Gelson's, you know? Just
yeah, yeah. We just don't know, and there are obviously we've most people have seen Aquaman and all of that type of stuff, but apparently there are small groups of people in parts of the Pacific that can breathe hold their breath underwater a lot longer than the normal human, in terms of going deep underwater. And there is some thought that there are tribes in parts of the world that may have evolved from some type of um, species that came from the water, right? It's just all theory, all thought. I try not to look at anything where it's finite, but you always want to explore possibilities, right? Because, like you said, there's so much we don't know.
and I think that ties in so well with filmmaking, right? Where I think a lot of the films that make sci-fi and science fiction and look into all of these ideas, the one thing that the ones that are really successful get it right is you don't need to get it right. It's just a story. Doesn't have to be perfect. You know, I kid you not. I don't want to tell you the amount of times I've seen that interview where they were talking about Interstellar and then they were complaining about the spacesuits.
Yeah.
Who
So
cares? Who
it,
cares?
I feel like sometimes people forgot that sometimes a movie is just a
It's
movie,
just a movie.
and you just need to suspend your disbelief. You know what I mean? Interstellar had a broader theme, a message there. Again, you know what's an interesting one? Fast and Furious I mean, I like watching the Fast and Furious films. I'm so entertained by them.
Hmm.
And I just, the more ridiculous they get, the more entertained I am. I just think they're a really good
Be like
time
the car
to watch
flying
in a
for like
theater.
100 miles. Yeah,
Oh yeah,
yeah.
and you see Vin Diesel is superhuman and doing all these crazy stunts. But to me, I mean, the more ridiculous they get, the more I enjoy it. But then I hear people, they complain, this is not possible. A car can't fly in space. A human can't do this. And it's like, well, what happened to just having a good time and being entertained and suspending your disbelief with this? It's not always about having every like thing as accurate as possible, right? So that's why I like sci-fi and I like exploring alternate realities, alternate timelines, alternate things that could happen because people aren't going to sit there and measure every little detail of it should be like this. And no, this person would never say it. The uniform doesn't look like NASA's uniform, and it's like, come on, you're there to to be entertained, have a good time, suspend disbelief. And I'm like, are people still capable of suspending disbelief? I ask that question every once in a while, right? I wonder about that. Just because we started like looking at films from such an analytical standpoint and almost weaponizing them, and I'm like, are we still able to suspend our disbelief for 2 hours, 90 minutes, couple hours, just to like kind of get swept up into whatever's happening in the world of this film? I mean, I like to think we can, but I'm not 100% sure sometimes, right?
I think also some of the beauty that comes into that, right, is where you have somebody like Mel Brooks, even though he's 98 years old, he's coming out with Spaceballs too, which I'm just like, that to me is just ultimate creativity in it itself. It's somebody that loves making films. It's somebody that loves being able to tell stories. And let's get something one straight. This man has struggled his entire life. He has had films that have had literally had friends and needed to back him up just to get the ball rolling. It just keeps going. It's like, is Spaceballs anything like Star Wars? Yes. Is it a great parody? Yes. Is it funny as hell? Yes. Is it great to smoke weed with? Hell yeah. And we got a second one? Like, come on. That to me is something that we could look forward to. It's not about getting a political or agenda or making the story as realistic as possible. Even though, like, I know that you love the movie Interstellar tries to portray that, but it's still allowing the story to breathe. You know, still throwing in a little bit of fiction, still throwing in a little bit unreality. You need that. It's a movie. It's not supposed to be real, unless, like, you're watching like Vietnam or World War II. Okay, that's a little bit of a different story.
Well, okay, yeah, that's yeah,
Yeah,
those are
that's
different. Those
nonfiction.
are
Yeah,
yeah, you're recreating something historical, factual, all of that. So yeah,
yeah.
obviously attention to details is important, but still there was a shift in the audience somewhere. I don't know what caused it, and I'm not talking about so much international audience. I'm talking more about North America. I don't know where some of the jadedness came in, but something did change somewhere, and I'm not sure
I
where, how, or
I would
why.
say
Right?
most recent, and this may seem a little bit bizarre, was when they came out with the movie Judy, which was based off of Judy Garland.
Hmm.
And when they made that film, and I watched that on a plane, I came out of that and I was just so disgusted because the way that they portrayed her was like this rag, this piece of shit woman that literally was just run through the mill and just survived off of alcohol and pills. Eventually, until she eventually killed herself. It just again, like we were talking about before, and how it's really great to be allowed to have a story to breathe, especially when you're dealing with fiction. But then the other caveat is you make a nonfiction story where you literally belittle this person. And then what do you think happens? You have all the people that are coming there of saying, here's to the women, here's to the feminism, da da da, da, and they're going, this is not a way. This is a way of just pissing people off. It's like you're either going to tell a freaking story, or if you're going to tell a historical story, tell it the way that it is. Don't throw in goddamn fluff and call it fiction. Don't call it nonfiction.
Yeah, that's why I think sometimes when you're going down that road and
Right?
making certain types of film, there is a level of responsibility. Listen, no different than because that will influence people as you're leading on to. It's
Yeah.
no different than we started earlier talking about. I said, "Hey, I'm going back to watch these episodes because I just want to know of Star Trek. I want to know what I was watching when I was a kid. What were the themes in these episodes? What were they trying to portray, right? And what was the ideology, and what was all these things? Because I know, looking back, it did impact me. So I'm just curious as an adult, where, what was planted in my consciousness, right?
Where that story
Um,
started to develop. Yeah.
yeah, and the ideas that would later develop in my mindset, and that would influence essentially a lot of my future work. So I was really curious about that. So yeah, going back to what you're saying, I do think they're understanding this, right? That you can have such an impact like that. Even us talking right now is impactful. Imagine the person listening to this in tomorrow or a few years from now, whatever. There's one thing they heard. It's almost like a seed in their consciousness, and then it takes root and it starts to like grow. And 10 years, 20 years, there, uh, again, this was the whole point behind the movie Inception, right? Planting that idea, that inception point. Sometimes you're not sure exactly where it comes from. So when it comes to telling those stories, especially like that, when you have to recreate certain things, I do think there is a responsibility to be as true as possible to it, because again, you don't want to, I guess, necessarily be the. I'll give you a perfect example. We were in Sicily in December. The film we dropped last year, we were at the uh, Palladino International Sports Film Festival. We had a great time, and I was there with the cast and crew of the film,
What's the name of the film?
EFC, and we were nominated for 7 awards at the festival. We won one for Best Director, which
Eh,
I guess that was me.
uh-huh.
So it was super excited for that. It was great, but that brought us to Sicily, and it's really interesting because our DP was there, Jason, and he was there. He says, "I'm here, and there's something I've got to do while I'm here." He was telling us this as we're on the plane and stuff like that. He goes, "There's some footage I need to capture for a documentary I want to work on." And so I'm like, "What are you talking about?" I'm like, "Oh, you're going here to work?" Right? And he said, "Yeah." He says, "So," and he started explaining it to me, and he was pointing it out over there. He said, "The movie, The Godfather, right? Um, when it came out, obviously it was a big hit. It almost um, over glorified a certain lifestyle and a certain type of character, right? So obviously we adults could maybe differentiate, let's say, one of those types of characters from real life, okay? Um, but apparently there was a whole generation that grew up romanticizing this type of lifestyle and these types of characters you saw in the movie, The Godfather. Um, so much so that it became a thing over there. And I don't want to really speak to any one particular side of this debate, um, but it was just interesting. I just wanted to note, and because we're talking about how much little things affect the psyche, that there was a whole generation who grew up kind of romanticizing a particular lifestyle and particular characters, right? And I don't know if the filmmakers involved started off thinking that would be the case. They're just telling a good story and doing all of those things. But it's interesting to look back so many years later and to see something like that, right? Um, Apparently, it's a little bit of an issue over there that they're dealing with locally. But I think from a filmmaking standpoint, there is you got to have some type of awareness of what you're depositing in that in the ethos. You know, you just
Yeah.
don't know where the seeds are gonna land. And I heard Denzel Washington, which was when he did Training Day, the one he won the Oscar for, and you know, he kind of played the protagonist, antagonist, whatever you want to call it, but he had a requirement for the producers. He says, "I'm going to play this role. However, I don't want to glorify this character, and I don't want to glorify the lifestyle. And people watching this, especially children who are going to watch this, they have to know there are consequences to this lifestyle and to these actions." So he made sure that when the film was done, that was represented, right?
Yeah.
I guess he had that awareness that he doesn't want to put that out there in the ethos, so it had to culminate in a certain way because that's the realistic outcome of certain people taking certain actions. Just being, I guess I'm talking in a very nice way here, but essentially, going back to where we started, I think there is a responsibility when it comes to certain things to be as to represent ideas or stories that have maybe historically happened the way they were, as you said. We're not rewriting history
No.
at all, and I know a lot of that happens. So many films have come out, and I've heard people say this is revisionist history, and it's like, wow, okay, those are very strong words, right? Really strong words, and I'm like,
Well,
this is insane.
well, it's being able to be transparent. The the idea also is when the movie The Godfather was coming out, and I'm originally from New York. And New York is notoriously known as the blue collar immigrant state. And it gets that because there were a lot of immigrants that came to that state that were dehumanized. Many examples of it were the Italians, the black community, the Irish community, the gay community. A lot of communities were completely demoralized for a very, very, very long time in New York. And what came out of that was the mafia. The Italian mafia, as horrendous and terrible as they were that pillar for the community. They were the fathers, the grandfathers, the uncles, the aunts, the grandmothers that were all taking care of one another, raising kids, trying to take care of the community. To your point, it's the same idea of like, this is very nice, but again, it's built on crime, abuse, trauma, and there are serious consequences to these actions, to living these lifestyles. It's not just, going over for Thanksgiving dinner and then pulling out a gun at Vinny, and shooting him cold blood in front of 13 people. Like, it's a lot more layered and detailed than that. That's what I think I understand where you're coming from too. Is like nonfiction, you can play around with as much as you want. You can go in all different types of directions. Fiction, sorry, nonfiction. Nonfiction is a whole different story. There, it's you don't have to be the best storyteller, but you have to be a very careful storyteller. You really have to know how to be able to portray the story correctly because it can
Yeah.
go very sideways very
Yeah,
easily.
yeah, very, very easily. And but on the flip side to that, and I know me personally, like a lot of the work I'm focusing on going into the future, it's I mean, again, I may not be around to see if it ever takes root or not, but I would hope if I was around and the thought took root that it would be in a positive spin. But if you look at the world we live in right now, a lot of people from different perspectives would say it doesn't make sense. There are people flying in airplanes lined with gold, and then there are people you can look at in the richest nation in the world, or whatever you want to call it, that don't have shoes. That it's such a vast contrast that it's mind-boggling, right, sometimes if you really, really, really think about it. And you can look at the money system, the monetary system, and I often like to say it's pretty much a winner and loser situation. Someone has to lose for somebody to gain. No different than a lottery. You could have 14 million people put a dollar into the lottery, and it's essentially you're almost 1 out of 14 is going to win. But what happens? They're winning $14 million from people who voluntarily put up from whatever. They lost $1 for one person to gain $1, whatever. Okay, that's essentially the money system. Okay, we've all agreed to the rules of it. Great, whatever. What happens if we got rid of it? Y- Listen. So, is there a different way
Yeah, there is.
is there a different type of monetary system we could utilize? And and these are things that I'm trying to explore in future stuff. But I would like to think that just proposing the ideas and maybe putting certain ideas out there. And by the way, I grew up like debating this for the longest times, and going back, I realized where the inception point came from. Again, that's why I said a lot of my worldview was shaped by TV shows I was watching as a kid. I can see episodes in Star Trek where they were arguing about this system because they had evolved to a place where money was no longer. It was a very archaic idea, they thought, a very old Earth century, like archaic way
Yeah.
of operating, right?
Think about in
And
think about in Star Trek how a lot of the times when they would interact with different species, they would try to do trade. So, even looking at Next Generation, one of the things that they would do is they would find a planet, try to interact with the species, and either they maybe have needed minerals or something from that planet, and they would figure out a way of trading with these creatures or these beings. Again, like I don't think you ever really see money used in Star Trek. Like very rare. Maybe like in one of those like archaic species that are still using coins or some digital. Remember they had in the 80s, they used to think of them as like plaque cards. They looked like those CD-ROM cards, right? Right. Obviously, that's
yeah.
not realistic at all, but like back then, that was an idea of what currency could be. That that kind of shows you that this way that we're living is very archaic if we talk about the future.
But until you have these conversations and you explore these ideas, sometimes when I just present that concept, I'm hit with a lot of resistance immediately without hesitation. That's impossible. We could never live in a barter society.
It's not
And I'm
true.
like, wait a minute. I didn't say anything about that. I'm just proposing the question,
We've
right?
already lived a barter
Um,
system before. It's only recently in the past
yeah.
maybe 200 years we've been living in this type of system that's now fiat currency, which in English just means it's backed by trade or some type of valuable good. But like this is all new. We are very much in a new age of human civilization, like that has only been around for such a short period of time. And I think, again, what is so important about filmmakers such as yourself is you are able to have that interpretation, that lens. You're not just some film director that's coming out of Hollywood and trying to make the next blockbuster that's going to make, $500 million at the box office. You're really trying to portray a story in your head and visually put it out on a screen. That to me, like, that's incredible skill in and itself, especially with the time that we're dealing with, because you have every single excuse that you can use to sell out. Every single excuse. Tons of people do it every single day, but you don't.
Yeah, holding fast. I feel like because I've had a broader view in terms of what I wanted to do with films and storytelling, it was easier to just hold. There were opportunities I think I was presented with when I was kind of breaking into the industry that would have probably allowed me to go on a different path with a lot of bigger, more established studios, but I always knew that those pathways would never allow me to do the things I really wanted to do. Like, for example, the next film, one of the ones I'll be doing, Genesis, it's about original thought theory, about how this is a world that has gotten to the point where there's no more original thought. So every thought that could be thought has already been thought. And it's more about how do you get back to that place where those thoughts could be free flowing again. And it's really more about not doing the things that keep us from having those thoughts in order to allow us to have those thoughts again. But um, so broad concepts that I really wanted to explore, and I've always felt that maybe society, human society, might get into certain places in time where there's certain limitations, and when you start to kind of put these little seeds out there, you just don't know what takes root with who, what, where, when, why. And what maybe comes out of it. Maybe it's nothing, absolutely nothing, right? Or maybe it is something. Like here we are. I think Gene Roddenberry's. We've been talking a lot about Star Trek for our time together here, and that was something that. Okay, what did the original series come out in the late '60s or something like that?
1964.
Okay, so if it's 1964, that means it was in his thoughts way before that, right? And I don't know how much time he actually spent just to develop the stories, the script, and everything around it.
Many years.
Let's go back. So let's go back to the 50s because he's probably at least a decade into it. Um, and here we are, 2025, still talking about it. And I'm talking
It
about
holds
how
up.
me,
It holds up.
yeah,
It
it
holds
holds
up
up.
even after all this
Yeah.
time. And how many things, even as you, as like, being, we both being creative and loving the arts and filmmaking and television shows, how many things that are that old still hold up? I can maybe think of 5 things on my fingers. Not many.
It's There's not a lot today. Even as you go back to music, there are songs I hear and I'm like, well, will we still be playing this in 20 years? Are people even going to remember this song? It feels different, right? And again, I can't explain why. I don't know if just because things are just moving at such a fast pace right now. Like for example, you can have a Drake, for example, that he'll put out I don't know, a song today, another one tomorrow, 16 more the week after, and then another album's out 9 months from now. And maybe because things are moving so much faster, we're not sitting with it long enough where it actually, I don't know, has an influence. But you're right. There's a lot of things right now, whether it's just the content or whatever it is. I just wonder, 20 years from now, does it hold up? Are we still talking about it? Like, there's not a lot of movies. Matrix is interesting. The one that came out, the original from 2000, because 25 years later, uh, I talk to kids like a lot of the younger ones. What are they? I'm not even going to call them millennials. The one below them. What would they
Gen Z.
be? Is that Gen Z? That's it. Most of them have never seen the film.
I guess I'm alone.
They've
I guess I'm
never
alone.
watched the film. Yeah. But they know they know the concepts, they know everything about it. They've seen the clips on TikTok, right? And but they could tell you everything about the film having never seen the film. The concept that was behind it, the concept of being in this kind of matrix, this whole scenario. But I'm fascinated by the fact that a lot of them I've spoken to have never seen the film, but yet they can tell me everything about it, the concepts, the ideas, the belief, and I'm like, this is a good example of a film that has really kind of stood the test of time, right? It still kind of at times feels as relevant as it probably felt like it was more relevant now than it was back when it came out, right?
Isn't
Um,
it interesting on how movies that don't have any societal or political agendas or any social norms tie into them, they kind of leave a mark on people and people remember them even decades later. Isn't that interesting? It's so bizarre. I wonder why.
yeah. Maybe there something about being authentic to just the story you're trying to tell
Authentic.
without any
That's so
hidden
archaic,
agendas
Jaze.
and yeah.
Authentic?
We lo-
Not even a word?
Could you imagine? Authentic in the age of you know it's funny because you start scrolling through things like TikTok and stuff and it's like I've got to the point where I've determined a while ago I will believe nothing I see on social media. Even if it's true, I don't believe it. That's my first response. Because obviously most things are not authentic, and until you can actually go and deep dive and check, I look at it all is almost like a TV series. You know what I mean? Because you kind of can't until you can deep dive and check some facts. So it's better just to default, don't believe it, and then go fact check. Okay, yep, that was true. All right, I see what's going on. I believe that, right? And so I wonder if more people are doing what I'm doing now and just not believing anything, because things out there have gotten a little ridiculous to a degree. And maybe by doing that, all of the power that maybe we have given so many organizations in terms of disinformation, maybe we're taking it away if more people are doing that. I don't know if they are or not, but I know my wife and I are certainly not believing anything until we can fact check it and prove it to be true, right?
I love how, like, we talk about insight, and I love how, like, on this podcast right now we have a filmmaker that, like, being like, hey, those like reels you've been watching for like hours, I don't think the information is 100% accurate. And like, you're like the best person for this example, because like the amount of content you sift through, it's like you could sniff the bullshit a mile away. You're like, nah, nah, yeah, this is
Yeah.
horseshit in
Th-
its finest.
Yeah, and I'm sitting here like, first of all, I'm a little amazed how also that could be weaponized, right? Like, it's just this whole political theater, I think, with the U.S. and China, the trade wars, the tariffs. I'm looking at how it was playing out on social media, and I said, this is literally like a script. Like, did somebody write a script on this? Because okay, you're charging these tariffs, we're doing this now, and then all of a sudden, there's people were getting bombed with a lot of content from, I guess, China, where they're like, well, by the way, you can come to this factory because this is where these shoes that you like are made. You just buy it from us directly. You're welcome to come here. We won't charge you anything. It's just pay for your airfare and come
Yeah,
get your stuff, right? And
yeah.
it's just,
Give you free
I'm
coffee.
watching this. Yeah, it's like I'm watching this stuff, and I'm like, all right, okay, this is theater at its finest, right?
We
Um,
were talking about this before. Like right now, the independent industry for music and film is larger than it has been in over 40 years. It's outselling the mainstream outlet by, I don't even know what the margin is. And a lot of that has to do with streaming, for a great example, because we were talking about earlier how people are just not interested in TV. Makes it cheaper for filmmakers like you to be able to sign up with streaming platform, be able to get your content out. So, you could scream from the high heavens on social media how everything is crumbling, and these tariff wars and all this going on. But like, reality is that, well, they kind of shifted in another direction. We got Zoom and all this, so we just kind of do calls over the real truth. We know the real truth. You know the real truth because you go through it every single day. You're not the person that's posting those social media reels. You're the person that's actually living what's going on. So, who do you think is going to give you the real? It doesn't have anything to do with experts. It has to be like, who the hell is actually in that environment? You are. Not that bloke that's on TikTok freaking 24 hours a day. Like, come on, man.
it's a whole new world, right?
It is.
It's, and that's why I think, like, for example, like what you're doing with this podcast, you've got. I've been going back and listening to a lot of your podcasts with different guests,
Thanks,
and
man.
you've had a variety of
Yeah.
people,
Some crazy.
just
Just a
different
little crazy.
backgrounds. Yeah, different backgrounds, different experiences, different podcasts in general. I think are great because you're being exposed to. For example, we're having a real conversation right now. There's nothing manufactured about this.
Except this
There
weed.
wasn't, and you didn't even pre-plan anything. You're just like, we're gonna go with it. I guess it matches the theme of the podcast. We're getting lost in a groove
And
here, and
you covered
yeah,
a lot, and I mean, I really appreciate, especially like you going over with your films, and just your expertise in the industry, because again, like that's something that gets lost. It's like, yeah, it's great to be an expert, but you know, are you actually living the life? Is this, either a hobby that's part of your life and then you're having something else that's keeping yourself financially stable? Is this your main focus on a day-to-day basis? These things matter. This is how we interact as people in industries, in environments, in media, and it's important to bring these things up and talk about them because they are important. It's not just a 30-second reel, on
Yeah,
TikTok.
and the funny thing you say, I've never seen so many experts in any era of my life before, and as you say, there's so many experts and so many things on.
So
So
true.
it's like,
So many. So many.
uh, yeah, it's insane, uh, and sometimes I look at a lot of people who are, um, everybody's an entrepreneur, of course. And I find it funny because there was a time I remember, even in the 90s, early 2000s, people like entrepreneurs, it wasn't a very glorified thing, right? Good luck trying to get money from a bank as an entrepreneur or whatever, right? It was a lifestyle, and it was just it was it wasn't as glorified as I think sometimes it's presented to be. It's a hard path, right? But I've never seen so many expert entrepreneurs in my life, right? And I consider myself almost a lifelong entrepreneur because I've always been kind of betting on myself to a degree and doing my own thing. But it's just, I just, yeah, I mean, it just to what you're saying, I think Neil deGrasse Tyson called it. We're living in a time where critical thinking may be the most important asset to any human being right now. Just being able to ask the question, why? What if? What's the purpose? Just questions, right? Out of curiosity, just amazing
Not
sometimes,
not
right?
just being surface level, like really being able to ask the difficult questions and be able to portray them and get through them, and even if it may lead to conflict or you may fail or have difficulty getting off the ground, but it's part of the journey, man. Nothing comes easy, nothing comes without failures, and nothing comes without being able to say, I don't know, please help me.
Especially in an age where a lot of the information and access to resources is so readily available, right? It's just a little bit of effort in going to search for it, but it's there, right? Um, Access to people, resources, information. It's just more than ever. More than ever.
It is. What was I going to ask? Oh, I wanted to ask you because I know we went over. You have a new movie that's coming out next year. Next year, right? Genesis.
Next year we have another film coming out. It's a
Monopoly.
psychological romantic thriller called Let Go.
Okay.
Um, that was shot across 14 different European cities. It's a wild ride actually on that one. Essentially, the main character, which is played by Alex Cruz Keon, he goes to Europe. He's kind of stuck in a past where he had a girlfriend that had went missing, and there's so many unresolved answers and questions, and he just never got over it. And he goes there searching for her or answers, and I don't want to give too much away, but essentially
Please.
he finds her again, or he finds someone who thinks is her, and they both end up taking each other on like this journey of I call it self-discovery. He kind of has to discover himself in order to let go of the past, a la the title, right?
Mm-hmm.
It also has Carly Rose in it. Both of them just came off our last film, EFC, which was the Women's Mixed Martial Arts film. And so, yeah, that one we're excited excited for. Genesis, we're in development for it right now, looking to move quickly into pre-production, and we'll probably be going in production with it late next year. Again, that one is the one quite excited about. I call it Nolan level. You know what I mean?
It's
In
your
terms
baby.
of the yeah, it's the themes we want to explore in there, the concepts, but still keeping it entertaining and engaging as well. But it's definitely the one I'm most excited about, and I think it's one that could age very well. Um, the themes in there that we want to explore, let's see if they take root. But I feel like, again, if you want to look at the inception point for a lot of those themes, as an adult, I realized where they were coming from,
Hmm.
right? So I took maybe what Gene Roddenberry started, and I feel like I'm going to take it to the next place, right?
That's
That
ambitious.
next,
It is. It's very
yeah, the
ambitious.
with Genesis, and so that's one of the reasons why I'm so excited about that. And right after that is the other one. Interesting because sometimes we talked about measuring time earlier and stuff like that, and I realize we're at a point where I talk to a lot of people, especially Gen Z. Uh, Things, if they don't happen instantly, it's like it's not a success. It's been a disaster. But Monopoly is a film. I feel like the script was written, I think, around 2010,
Okay.
2012. It just hasn't, and it revolves around the collapse of the monetary system. And what would the world look like without a monetary system? So it's been interesting to see world events because it was written back 2010, 2012, and I remember writing it. One of the concepts was a currency for the people by the people, which was a digital currency, exactly how we see Bitcoin and crypto. Um, the story is so much deeper than that, but we actually explore the collapse and what the world without the monetary system could look like. It's just never been the right time to do that film. It's still not quite there yet, but I believe after we get Genesis done, it's going to be the right time for that. And when I look back, and I'm just going back to say how we measure time, because I feel like it could be better received. I think in 2030, what the story is going to be and where it's going to go and the concepts we're going to explore there better than it could have been in 2012. It's just the timing sometimes to things. You can't really put a measure. It's just when it's right, it's right,
Yeah.
and that's it. That's all there is to it,
Yeah,
you know?
we talked about this before. Movies like Rocky Horror Picture Show, where it came out too early. That movie should have not came out in the 1970s, especially not 1974. Like, it came out when it came out, and obviously it had kind of a pickup about 10 or 15 years after it came out. But I think that's really smart, though, being able to understand that, sometimes it takes time to be able to develop these stories. You can't just pick up a camera and start making it, even though you have a story. You sometimes have to figure out the right time, the right moment to put those films together. And I think that's really, I think that's beautiful. I think that is another way of being able to tell storytelling. Not the fastest way, but I think sometimes the most beautiful way of doing it.
Yeah, the it's just being in touch with it and knowing it. And there's so many examples. Um, Megapolis came out, Coppola's film recently, and that's a film I feel as though if it came out in the 90s would have probably been a blockbuster movie on every
It
level
came
of
out too late.
every spectrum.
He
It came
wait
out a little,
he waited too late.
yeah,
He waited way too
yeah,
late to come out with this movie.
yeah. So that's another example of that on one side. I think one of my favorite TV series in the past, let's say 20 years, it's hard to think 20 years, might have been Battlestar Galactica. They tried with that film in the 70s, or that series, it didn't quite take. Uh, they tried it again, and it was a sensation. I heard they want to reboot it again. I don't know, obviously for obvious reasons, they want to capitalize on it, but at least they tried it 30 years after the first time, and it took better than it did the first time. It was a huge hit. So yeah, sometimes you can't. You just have to weigh it out, move with some instinct, and you can't really put a time or measure time around things. Sometimes it's just now for this, and then a different time for something else, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's why I said with Monopoly, it might be the oldest script we have in our development slate because that started back in 2010. And it's not the first one. Like, it could maybe end up being the last, but I still feel as though it's an important story to tell. It's just looking back, I really feel like it's going to be better received the closer we get to 2030, as opposed to, it's hard to think now that that was 2012. That
It's a while ago. It's been a minute.
yeah, it was a while
It's been a
ago.
minute.
Yeah, and what's scary about that script is to see the events that have taken place. Sometimes I'm like, did I write the future? What? I go back, I'm like, this is weird
It
because
is.
it's in the script, right? And so maybe yeah, so I could so yeah, all right. So on that note, before we wrap up, maybe that's how Gene Roddenberry was writing his stuff. He was tapping into something and
Into the mystic.
downloading these
Into the
stories
mystic
into
mountains.
the ethos
Yeah.
of things, and if he was alive today, he'd be like, "Did I write the future?" you know?
Kind of did. In a way, I
Yeah, I
mean,
kind of
he was wrong
did.
about 2024, but, I mean, he didn't get everything.
2024. Wait, what did he say about
Well,
2024?
there was. So this is kind of a little bit in the Star Trek lore. The series is kind of focused, 3 centuries into the future. But
Yeah.
some of the Star Trek lore that they've kind of been making now has kind of been stemming of them going back to our time period. And some of that is kind of loosely based on what Gene Roddenberry talked about. Interesting enough, he never really focused on the 21st century. He mainly focused on 3 centuries ahead, which, again, like you were kind of pointing out before, is a really great way of thinking about this because, like, you can't really predict the century that's going to happen next. Kind of predict a little further down the line. I don't know why that is, but it kind of works because then we're not alive to be able to prove it wrong. You know what I mean? Like now we're alive to prove it wrong, but if it's three
Yeah.
centuries ahead, like who's gonna prove that wrong?
Yeah. The future will judge on our
Yeah, let
behalf,
them
right?
deal with it.
Yeah.
It's not our problem. Uh,
Yeah.
um, before we wrap up, Jays, I did want to ask you a question. I know you got a website. Where can these people find your films? Where's like the easiest place for them to find it?
Uh, well, IMDb. So you probably, if you want to just go look, well, you can find me on any platform at my name, Jaze Bordeaux, and from there, just click on some links. You'll probably get to IMDb, and on IMDb, you can see the full repertoire of stuff in development, stuff that's out, stuff that's about to come out. That would be ideally the place, or just follow along on any social media platform. It doesn't matter. Instagram, X, Blue Sky. I think I'm on most things, if not everything, and I'm pretty good about putting updates out there and stuff like that. And that would be the most ideal thing to do, right?
I think that's amazing. Like you're not only just getting one place, but you're getting all of them. It's like, I'm not just on TikTok. I'm on all of them.
All of them that exist as of the time we're talking right now. Who
Exactly.
knows what tomorrow's going to be? But hey, you know what? Before we go, there was one podcast I heard you talking about Snapchat. I am not on Snapchat. I still either can't figure out what that is.
Neither can I.
And
Oh my god, I'm not alone. I don't know what it is. Is it a messaging app? Is it a social media
yeah,
platform? What the hell is it?
yeah. I just heard the other day people are still using. I'm like, that's still around?
Yeah, I'm like,
Like this
what?
that thing won't go away, huh?
No.
It's still it's
No.
still there.
Oh my god.
So, but I'm not on it. So that's one of the ones I'm not on, right?
Oh my god. You know what? It's okay though. You know what? Like, what I usually try to do is because I've started doing Substacks for these episodes. For anybody that feels like you're a dinosaur and you're like, I don't have time for, I will leave a link for Jaze's IMDb page on there. All you got to do is click that orange button, and then bam, all the shit's right there.
A la 2025, right?
Right.
Versus going back. Listen, I'll tell you one more thing before we go. Somewhere in the 90s, I had fell asleep and to watching TV as we did in the 90s. That was very
Yeah.
common, right? And I woke up in the middle of the night and I saw an ending to a movie, and it was so dramatic, right? And it was like I was up for the ending, and there was this train and the Swiss, the Germans, and a gunfight, and it was so dramatic. And then I fell asleep, right? And I woke up like, what was that movie? Like, oh my goodness, it was like that one scene got me so hooked, and I'm like, the only thing I knew is Michael Douglas was in it and Melanie Griffith was in it. But it took me 6 months going around the video places trying to describe this movie. There's this movie and it has Michael Douglas in it, and obviously Michael Douglas at that point had done so many films,
Dozens.
and it has so and so in it, and they were in this uniform, and there was something about a train, and there was this. It took 6 months of describing that to video store people. I went to the Blockbusters, just to bring this to a full circle. I went to all these video
Oh my
stores,
god.
and I ended up at some random and random like small like video place 6 months after this. 'Cause I spent 6 months. I would literally stop and go ask because I really wanted to know what this film was, right? And 6 months later, I found out, right? And it was a movie called Shining Through. It was about women um, in the war at during World War II. And but that took 6 months just to find out the title of the film. Now in 2025, all you got to do is click on a
That's
link,
it.
right? Like,
That's it. No more 6 months, people. No
yeah.
more. Now you know.
We're not in those archaic days anymore, right? Just click a link, boom, right there.
Uh, Listen, Jay, I have to say, man, like, God, we covered so much, and I feel like we need more creative people like this. We need to be able to have more conversations like this and not only just open up about art, but just how we make it. It's not for anybody, but just for ourselves. Like, these are our stories, and we just want to share them. We want to share them with everybody and hopefully be able to leave a mark that'll last decades, maybe centuries.
Hopefully, hopefully too, because it's because a lot of artists, and I know you can relate to this too. I feel like some of the messages I'm hearing, people feel like they're getting lost in the grandness of whatever's going on. We didn't even talk about AI or anything like that, but
It's okay.
um,
Somebody else
yeah,
is talking
it's just
about
for
it. They talked about it
yeah,
for us. Yeah.
yeah, another time. And so I feel like some artists feel as though they're just getting lost in the groove of the world and everything that's going on, but at the end of the day, you just stay true to what you're doing and who you are, and just let it come out, and not really worry too much about whatever's going on in the world, right? Just do your thing, be you.
Yeah. And you know what? To that point, I mean, you can get lost in the groove and listen to this podcast. Hey, if you want to check out more of the podcast, of course, you can find us at Awesome. James, like I said, thank you so much, man, for coming on. All y'all want to catch up more of this podcast? All right. Peace out.